Hi, I'm Jimster71 and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the different options and comfort settings available in the PlayStation version of Sairento VR. So don't go anywhere. If you've had a look through the options on Sairento VR, there's quite a lot of them and there's a few different pages as you can see there. So in this video we're going to be having a look through the different options, see what they all do, and I'll demonstrate a few in the dojo as we go through them. So we'll start off at the beginning with this one, Show Movement Arc. Now when you move in Sairento, you tend to be using jumps or dashes. Just turn around and so you've got a dash and a jump. Now that white line and the green are the movement arcs. So if I turn that off, when you dash you don't get any arc, you just get the end spot. Same with the jumps. So you have to rely on knowing where your controller's facing. Not sure why you'd want them turned off, but there you go. Next one, Show Loot Pickup Text. I've had a little play with this one and I actually can't see what it does. When you see loot, when you kill enemies, even with it on, I didn't see any text next to it, and with it off, the same. So I'm not entirely sure if this actually does anything. If you know exactly what it does, put it down in the comments, because I've tried a few things but I didn't see anything. So next one, hide life and chakra bars when full. Now when you're playing the game, this is the default setting. When you get hit or you do movements, the chakra bars and the life bars, which run across the bottom of your display, will go down, and that's the only time they appear. Now if you change this setting to off, you'll always see the life and chakra bars on the screen. Now due to the crop of the video you probably won't see them on this, but they're there. The default is only see them when they're damaged, and always means you never see them. So if you want to go for something more realistic, stick for that. Damage numbers, as a pretty self-explanatory really. When you kill enemies, or when you hit enemies, you can either turn it off so you don't see any damage, critical hits only, so like headshots and things like that you get numbers for, or you can turn it on so every time you hit someone you get a damage number. Okay, kill streak and style kills. Kill streak is obviously how many enemies you kill in quick succession. Style kills are when you kill people by doing such things like headshots, or when you slide in, or during a flip. They all count as style kills. If you want that total showing up on the screen, so it's kind of more of an arcadey type feel I guess, then leave that on. If you don't want any of that, turn it off. Nice and easy. Another self-explanatory one is the enemy health bars. If you want to see them, on. You don't want to see them, turn them off. And again with the numbers, if you want to see numbers above the health bars all the time, great, more RPG like. If you don't want to see them, turn it off. And it's kind of more realistic I guess. Okay, Desaturate Screen at low life. As you get more damaged, it goes more black and white. If you don't like that effect, turn it off, but it's a handy indicator without looking at the chakra bar and your life bar to see how your health's doing. So you wouldn't want to turn the life and chakra bars off and turn that off, because then you wouldn't have much of an indication when you're about to die. So both on, or pick one, whichever you like. Self-explanatory item indicators, whether you want them on or off. This is similar to the loot text. I've had a little play around and I've not really noticed when they come into effect. Again, if you know different, put them down in the comments. Delete save file, pretty obvious. Don't click that unless you particularly want to. Get rid of your delete file. So that's basic gameplay options. Onto controls. Now the first one, by default, you can actually glide in the game. If you'd go from a jump, which I'll try and demonstrate with this. If I jump up high and I stretch my arms out, I actually glide slowly, bring them in, I'll drop where I am. So let's do that again. Jump up, go a bit higher. If I stretch my arms out, I can glide, and I can actually steer myself left and right as I glide. It's a handy option to have. If you don't like it, turn it off. Okay, rotation type. By default, it's set to 90-degree click turns. So, just like that. Turn right, turn left, 90-degree click turns. I have it set to 45, because I prefer that. Or, if you want free rotation, you do the free rotation, and by default you get blinders as you do rotation. And you can actually pick the speed, so half speed, that's the slowest rotation, times 4, that's the quickest. Set as whichever you like. Now accelerated dashes. When you dash, by default, it's turned off. Now acceleration, if you don't know, it's like the slow-mo effect you get, like bullet time. If you want it to happen every time you accelerate, turn this on. So, the normal dash, if I just demonstrate that, it's just a straightforward dash. So if I turn that on, you'll notice I'll go into a slow-mo during a dash. So it takes me longer to get there, but you can shoot people in the middle of your dash. But you'll use up chakra, because you're doing acceleration. Default, it's off. Movement ends acceleration, so if you're in the middle of an acceleration and you want to break it off, you can jump or dash and it'll kill the current acceleration period you're on. Turn it off and it won't, you have to wait until the acceleration finishes. You may as well leave it on because it's more responsive, as it says. Okay, accelerate while projecting movement, so that is when you are actually, you've got your arc coming out for a dash or a jump. You'll notice it automatically does that slow down. So like that. Get the noise, chakra goes down a bit, and enemies will be moving slower while you're planning your move. If you turn the acceleration off, you don't lose any chakra, but enemies are still moving at full speed while you're planning where you're going to jump to. So it's up to you how you want to do it. If you move around quickly all the time, and you're a bit more experienced with the game, you may as well turn the acceleration off and just whiz around the place. If you're a bit newer and you need time to think about where you're going, leave it on. Okay, reload method. Grab a gun. By default, to reload a gun, you have to shake it up and down, or down and up, whichever you prefer. If you'd rather just press up or just snap down, you can choose the options there. Auto reload by default is off. So when I get to the end of the magazine, I have to manually reload. Now if I turn auto reload on, when I run out of ammo, it automatically reloads without me having to manually do a reload. Depends which one you prefer. Whether you want to go for realism or ease, I guess. Okay, the next one is Locomotion Control. Now this one, normally on your non-master hand, if you use the large move button, it moves you forward, like this. You just normal locomotion. If I turn that off, my non-master hand now actually does dashes and jumps, exactly the same as the master hand. And you lose the fine locomotion, so up to you, but I tend to prefer that on. Locomotion direction, that's depending on which direction you're going to move in when you use your locomotion. For comfort reasons, it defaults to the headset. So wherever I look, if I look to my left and move over there, look to my right as soon as I'm pressing the button. But if I change it to the controller, if I'm looking straight ahead, my controller's to the side, slightly to back to the side. Now the advantage of using the controller, even though it's less comfortable, is if I point my controller backwards, I can walk backwards. Which you can't normally do with the headset, unless you're an owl. If you're an owl, you could probably do it backwards. But most people aren't. In fact, all people aren't, because otherwise they'd be owls. But anyway, The controller allows you to move backwards, and unless you've got a 3D rudder accessory, that's the only other way you're going to move backwards. Locomotion speeds quite self-explanatory. Stick it down low for the slowest, quite slow, snail's pace. Turn it up faster, and you really shoot around the place. Now there's one extra thing about locomotion. If you do a double press, you can actually move faster anyway. So that's my normal locomotion speed. If I double press, you can see I move a lot quicker. So that's normal locomotion, double press, you move faster. So there's not a lot of people know about the double press, so there you go. Accelerate locomotion, override locomotion speed when acceleration is active. So this basically means, I'll turn this on, if I do an acceleration move, so if I start moving, accelerate, I go slow because the acceleration's running, it practically stops me. Whereas by default that's turned off, so as I'm moving I go into acceleration and it makes no difference on my movement, so it's almost like I'm moving super speed during the acceleration. So it depends on whether you want to make it harder for yourself. Okay, rotate bow with draw hand. If I just grab my bow. The default is, if you grab the arrow with your draw hand, and I move it left and right like this, you can see the bow's rotating based on where my master hand, or my arrow hand, is pointing. Okay, so I'll just scroll back down to where that is. If I turn that off, when I grab it, my arrow hand movement doesn't do anything at all. I can only rotate it with my left hand, or my non-master hand, but it still fires the arrow in the direction I'm pointing. It feels less natural that way, but it's whichever you prefer. One other little tip on bows while I'm here. When you draw back the bow, if you hold the trigger on the left hand, you'll actually fire 3 arrows at once. Normally you fire just a single arrow, hold down the trigger on the left hand, 3 arrows, and you can also shoot. If you've got a bunch of enemies coming towards you, you can fire 3 at a time. Little tip there. Bow offsets. If you're trying to aim down the sights, or down the arrow, because there's no real sights, and you don't like the position that you're holding your arm, use the offsets to move it around a bit. Prefer jumps to dashes. Changing this to on means you can't dash anymore. Every time you do a move with a movement arc, it'll always be a jump. Whichever you prefer, really. I prefer to have a choice between dashes and jumps, but it's up to you. Okay. This is the non-comfort option. It's turning flips on. Now, by default, they're turned off. If I turn it on, if I do a jump, I stick my arms in the air. I do a flip and accelerate mid-flip, and I land again. Now, you need serious VR legs to do that regular. I haven't got serious VR legs, so I'm turning that off. I don't use flips. They look cool. I don't think they add a great deal to the game tactically, but it's up to you. If you want to be a flippy ninja, that's up to you. Go for that. Similar back and side flips off walls. You can turn that on. Accelerated flips, as you probably noticed, it did the acceleration in the middle, so it went into slow-mo in the center when you're upside down. So you can shoot people while you're upside down in the middle of a flip. You get style points for that, and it looks cool, but it might make you hell. You can turn off the acceleration and it'll just do a quick flip, but I don't really see the point in that, because I'll show you what that does. You basically just flip over it really quick, if you'll let me do it. I turned flips off, didn't I? Let's go back and try that again. Turn the flips back on. Try that again. Right, arms up, straight flip over. You're not going to get time to shoot anybody. It makes the flips just a way to make you throw up, with no gameplay value if you turn that off. So you may as well leave it on. Okay, Revere Scripts. These are for your melee weapons. Now I've got 2 swords on my waist. By default, these are both off. So I've got the swords, the hilts are facing outwards. If I grab them, it automatically points the swords in the correct direction. And if I put them back, it just flicks them back to where they go. And also if I pick them up cross hands, they're just facing the right way when I draw them. Put the swords back. Now if I allow reverse grip, if I grab them with my hands normal way, you can see that I've actually got them in a reverse grip, so it's like a stabby motion, which is quite cool when you slide past people and you can just sort of back slice them, or you can slice behind you. So if you go past an enemy, you can just stab them from behind. Let's put the knives back. If you want to draw them the correct way round, you have to either flip your hands around so you're facing this way, or grab them on the opposite waist. So if I grab them like that and then put them back that way. To get around that, there's grip switching. Turn it on. So when I draw the swords, even though they're facing the wrong way, if I press the draw button again, which is the X, it'll switch the swords around. So I can just flick them with X. So if I'm fighting someone and then I want to slide and do a cool slice, I can just flick it around and slice. You can have both swords facing the same way. So you can see they're opposite grips. But when you put them back, they always flip back anyway. Okay, point with a melee weapon instead of finger. Again, by default, it's pointing down the hilt. If I switch the weapon round, it's pointing towards the blade end. So it's running. The pointer is running perpendicular to my finger. If I put the weapon back, because you can see normally it points with the finger. So if I turn that off, it'll always point where the direction my fingers are. So if I pick that, you can see now, it's still pointing with my finger. It's perpendicular to the way it was before. So even if we move the weapon round, the pointing is still facing the same way. Turn that back on and it switches to being parallel with the weapon. I prefer it that way and that's the default. But whichever way you like. Fade teleport. When you do a dash or a jump, this takes away all locomotion. It's a comfort option. But the problem with this is when you actually do a jump, all it'll do is it'll fade and you'll arrive at the end point of the jump. So you can't do double jumps anymore if you turn this on. Now that's a bit of a problem because that limits the game quite a lot, because double jumps and wall runs and stuff like that are integral to the game. But if you still want to play it and you want it to be as comfortable as possible, you can turn that on. I wouldn't advise it, and if you can stand it, the game playing as it is, I'd leave that off. Okay, let's go on the accessibility menu. This one's just left or right-handed. If I switch that, my pointer goes onto my other hand, so my left hand is now the main hand. And that switches it back, so all the controls are swapped. Your left or right-handed is basically that option. Movement mode. Now full mode is by default, you get the jumps and, well, not the flips, only if you turn them on. If you turn it on to limited mode, that's another comfort option. That's very similar to turning on the fade teleport on the previous screen. It takes away a lot of the jumps and stuff like that, so you can't do double jumps. And it's not as good. It's more comfortable to play, but you're losing a lot of what the game makes the game what it is. Subtitles, wrist or screen. When you play through the story, a lot of the story and dialogue has subtitles across the bottom of the screen. If you want it on your wrist menu, switch that to wrist. Vision tunneling. Now this only really relates to when you do free rotation. As I had before, you notice when I did the free rotation left and right, it put blinders on. That'll turn it off. So you'll just end up with a normal free movement, no blinders. Some people prefer that, and some don't. So it depends how comfortable you need it. Right, quick weapon swap. When I've got my weapons, by default, if I want to switch to a different weapon, I don't have to holster these first. I can just switch to the weapon straight away. I just move to the other holster and I pick it up. Now, when you've turned this off, if you want it to be more realistic, I can't then grab the gun without putting the sword back. I have to put the sword back and then grab the gun. Similarly, I can't grab my sword anymore until I put the gun back. And with that on, as it is by default, much easier to switch weapons without having to holster the first one. Larger holster grab areas, self-explanatory. It gives you a bit more room, well, a bit more fudge space for the tracking for when you grab your side weapons and your back weapons. You may as well leave that on, unless you're finding you're picking up the wrong weapon by mistake all the time. Then try turning it off. Shake sensitivity is for when you're reloading the weapons and how hard you have to shake the weapon or to get it to reload. If you find you're always reloading by mistake, if you're particularly shaky-handed, then you want to drop the sensitivity down a bit so it doesn't reload quite as easily. But by default, I haven't really found any problems with it. If you do, you can adjust it with this. Setup and calibration on startup, so that's just the VR calibration. You may as well leave that on. Chaperone bounds shows you when you go out of area. I'm not sure if that's such an effect on the PlayStation, because that's chaperone bounds are something that's more associated with like the Oculus versions. But same thing applies. Blare vision when dashing and blare vision upon landing after a jump. Now these, which I think are similar with the show chaperone bounds and the setup and calibration on startup, these are all left over from the Oculus version. Because I did ask the devs about the blare vision, because I tried them out and they don't actually do anything, and these are left over from the port. So these are going to get removed in a future patch, so that they don't actually do anything. The functionality is not there. So that's all of those options. Onto the graphics menu. If you've got a PS4 Pro, which I have, you get a choice between resolution or performance. I've not really noticed much problem with the performance, so I usually stick it on the resolution, which is by default. The other options are for basic blood and gore, whether you want dismemberment turned on, so whether you want to hack bits off people or not. Blood and gore, blood splatters. You're going to let your kids play it. If you are, turn all that off, because you don't want that mess. If you're just playing it, turn it all on. More blood the better. Audio. Sorry, skip the audio there. Normal game sliders. And acceleration sounds when moving. Which is basically when you're doing the jumps and the dashes and stuff like that. There's 3 localization options: English, German and simplified Chinese. I know there was a patch that just came out. There was a couple of corrections to the localization. I don't speak German or Chinese, so I don't know how good that localization is. I've just got it on the default. Now this is the page if you've got a 3D rudder accessory. They're the like discs that you put your feet on, and you can basically move around using your feet. Gives you full locomotion when using the move controllers, which is pretty cool, and it's meant to help with motion sickness as well, because your feet are actually doing some of the movement. I've never tried it. I know some people who have and love it. I know some people who have and really don't like it. But this is the page that allows you to configure everything to do with that, whether your location type, your direction of movement, and also things like sensitivities and dead zones. So if you've got a 3D rudder and you're not happy with the default settings, fiddle around in this. And finally, the about settings is you've got the credits, version number for the current version, and that's basically all the options. There's just one last thing I wanted to mention on the menus. I have seen a couple of people mention this, is how do you actually select things on the menus? The trick, I should have done this at the start really, but the trick is a quick click with the trigger. Just very quick. If you hold it for too long, it won't actually select. It thinks you're going to do a drag, because you hold down the trigger to drag the menus up and down. This is on the master control on my right hand, all of this. So to select things, very quick click, and that'll sort you out. So that's all the options. Like I say, it's quite a lot. Hope you've learned something new. If you have, leave a like. If you haven't, dislike. Put in the comments if you've tried the options, which ones you prefer, and if there's any more other tips you've got around the game. I've been Jimster71. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.